Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the show. We're doing something a little bit different. So the audience will be able to see a live stream on YouTube, on Rumble. We're also simulcasting on X Spaces. Please join in either in the chat or ask for the mic, and you'll be able to ask questions for John. And it's supposed to be interactive. It's fun. We want the interaction with the audience. So, John, thank you again for coming onto the show. This is episode 32 or part 32 of a long series that we've been doing for years, actually. But a lot is happening in the news. So you take it away, and I'll do some of the admin stuff on the back end here. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Well, let's see. Where do we begin? We may be having a Black Monday, it appears. I've only just heard about this from Paul, but apparently the Asian markets are waking up, and some, like in Japan, have had their kind of dealing breakers go off because things were going down too fast, I presume. And so we may be about to see globally a Black Monday to rival the Black Thursday of 1987 in Wall Street. It may actually be the first, it could be a panic because of Trump's tariffs that he's unleashed on the world. Um, it might be something to resettle. It's certainly the stars are in line for such kinds of communication errors, which would be kind of a theme of a couple themes we'll be talking about in this episode, because I'm kind of wondering why it is that Trump has been, since mid-month, last month, really erratic, really kind of playing to his weaknesses, his impatience, his mercurialness, his kind of all over the place, changing opinions, trying to push Putin some this way, trying to threaten Iran severely to a people that just don't respond well to that. And he should know better, but he doesn't. He's kind of lost. So what I thought is, well, maybe it's something to do with the Mercury retrograde. We've had one since the 15th, well, since in March, and it's coming to an end tomorrow and going direct course, which is a very important thing getting back to the Asian situation, which, of course, tomorrow morning, when our Monday happens here in the Western Hemisphere, um, well, it's going to probably continue. Um, the the thing that is difficult with Mercury retrograde, just a little background, is four times a year, every 4 months, there is a period of 3 weeks where Mercury, in relation to our position in the sky, appears to be going backwards. That's because it's a closer, narrower orbit, closer to the sun than we are. It When that happens, usually the first few days into the 3 weeks, there's a lot of intensity. You might notice that you're starting to dream more vividly or have nightmares or things like that. And then you kind of get a rhythm with it. And then what happens is this is some Mercury retrogrades come in signs that actually make it wonderful for research or in meditation. But this Mercury retrograde is in Aries. Um, and it also has now moved in this new month into Pisces. And so mass messaging, maybe some messaging going forward in the markets in the East. And what happens at the end, usually when people say, okay, tomorrow the retrograde's over, everything's going to be great. I caution them as an astrologer, a political, mundane um, astrologer reading the world, that um, when you've had such an impetuous Aries impatience to move forward and not heed the message of Mercury saying, don't move forward, move in, move in. stop. Don't just do something, sit there. But the Mercury wants to go forward. It wants to message out to everybody and do all this stuff. And now it's like at the beginning of the race, it's ready. It's crouching down. The gun is up, and to pop, and then everybody's running the 100-mile dash. And but what happens? The worst time for the retrograde is the 5 days to a week following it, because people's unconscious motivation to want to move fast and catch up for all that stalling and difficult communications and stuff will actually create bigger miscommunications. Maybe that's what's going on in the markets. I don't know. I've just literally minutes heard about this from Paul. So uh, it's we shall see, and it'll be great because we'll be seeing what's going on in the Nikkei, in Hong Kong, in Beijing, which is just opened, and Shanghai. I think it's Shanghai, I think, where the financial markets are. Um, and then that'll move probably in a few hours into India, and we'll see what's going on in South Asia. Uh, it certainly could be a very historic day tomorrow. It's already tomorrow for people in Asia, and they're already going through that Monday. Black Monday, perhaps, uh, Reckoning Monday, um, a Moon Day, as Monday means, to check your emotions, check your intuition. Um, we shall see. Uh, it's, from what I can see through my screen, on the 4 screens that Paul is looking at, it's really active out there. And so uh, we shall see what goes on. So anyway, I think that Trump may have a similar problem where he'll try to move this next coming week too fast out of this funk he's in. And that could also add to this. I would also say that his tariffs have been, I would say, no brainer, the cause of this market excitement, because uh, something I've been writing about in preparation for my new set of emergency Hogue prophecy articles, which I began writing 5 days ago. I usually wait till the end of the month, but after a couple weeks of my last one sent out, now I have to send another one, especially because of this, a little bit about Ukraine, but majorly about what is converging in the Middle East. It is basically, we've survived the Ukrainian missile crisis. I've been talking about 3 crises starting in 2021. I started talking about how we'd have 3 Cuban Missile Crises rather than one. And it would be first one would be the Ukrainian missile crisis. The second would be the Iranian missile crisis. And the third would be the Taiwanese missile crisis. These are the 3 potentially biggest battlefields of the current conventional phase, hopefully to only remain conventional until it's over, of the Third World War. And we passed through the Ukrainian missile crisis after the November 5th election, and up to the inauguration day, we were in that crisis, and we came very close to a thermonuclear war, far closer than anything I predicted, than we saw in the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, Paul, are you ready?
Yeah, well, I was doing a bunch of stuff on the back end with all the admin, set up all the feeds. Just to remind the audience, we're live streaming on Rumble. We're live streaming on YouTube. There's a simulcast on X Spaces. The links are in the chat if you want to ask a question through X Spaces, or you can just type in your question. I'll read them off to John. But please make sure that you click the links that are in the description of each of the videos I do with John. That will take you to his website, and that way you can sign up for his periodical. You can do a reading. You can even buy his books. You know, he has 52 that I believe that have been published, and I'm sure you're writing many more. So,
Yes.
you know, there's a lot of content that you can purchase to help John's John's work. So please help support by clicking the links that are in the description box and help support. So again, John, you know, a lot has been happening. So let me just give just a little bit of an update here. So the Hang Seng is, well, it just flipped. All right, so CSI 300 is one of the one of the Chinese index. That's down just under 6%, 5.7%. S&P futures right now down 2.5%. Earlier, about an hour or two ago, it was down as much as more than 4%. So it is healing a little bit for the U.S. Oil is trading at $60 a barrel. I mean, not that long ago was trading at 69. So oil's thing. So the point here is that the markets are going down. Now the S and the yeah the Brent is trading at 64. Usually Brent trades higher than WTI.
So it's depressed,
Yeah,
the
well,
oil price?
yeah, it's going down. So oil. So since Friday, since Thursday and Friday trading, their oil has been going down. Bitcoin has been going down during the intraday trading for tonight. Bitcoin was trading at 77, and now it's trading, I think, at about 78. It being below 80 is a problem. Right now it's trading at 79. So it is there's some buyers coming into the market. Now, when
Right.
something starts to trade down heavily, you'll have a lot of institutional investors and algorithmic traders coming in and purchasing,
Yeah.
quote, at a discount. The question is, what's going to happen between this? I see this as a game of chicken between President Xi and Trump, with who's going to give in. And I'm not really sure if China's going to blink or not. Now, if they don't, we could literally see a meltdown in our markets. Now, I suspect that China has more to lose than the United States, because they send more products to us than we send to them. So really, I would think that they would swerve with the game of chicken before Trump does. But I mean, what's your take on it?
Maybe they want to make do the opposite. Maybe they want to kind of show how destabilizing the tariff idea is. I mean, I saw yesterday. I highly recommend people go to Peter Schiff's website and see the um, the um, the interview he did with God, what's his name? He's a Norwegian professor in Oslo that often is on with the Alexander Mercouris and Judge Knapp and all those people. And he is let's see, I'll try to find his handle here. Let's see.
Peter Schiff, I believe, also said to start loading up on Bitcoin. He's very bullish on Bitcoin. In
Well,
fact,
that's interesting. Yeah, that's really significant because he's been so anti-Bitcoin for so many years.
I thought I just saw him. Maybe he was just joking, but I thought I saw a post on X saying
Well,
that
he
people
he
need to
was
borrow money to put it in Bitcoin. But
he
it could have
was
been that
talking
he was
about
saying it
collecting
in a
gold.
joking way
He
without
was
knowing the
talking, but
backstory.
he's a gold guy, so he's been talking about, yeah, at the end of this thing that he did, gee, I can't remember his name. Let's see. Let me find him and see.
So someone said in the chat, John, that you predicted that about the Roaring Twenties.
Yep.
So maybe maybe we're seeing playing out.
Well, they're roaring. They've been roaring since they began. I mean, they began with a bang. They began with Trump 1.0 assassinating Qasem Soleimani, the third most beloved and powerful leader of Iran, an assassination. And that almost triggered the Iran-US war back then, just a few days into January 2020. So it started with a bang. And it's just continuing to go bang, bang, bang. And let me just see here. I gotta find. Um,
So for the ones that listen to my show, Miss Taiwan just texted me, and she says that this is probably going to be the beginnings of another 1987 crash of Black Monday.
Interesting. That's what I think Black Thursday was, 1987. And but it could also be a start of the recession, something that like what happened in September 2008, because definitely what Trump is doing can bring people into that. Let's see. This is, I really like you guys to see this. Peter shift. Here we go. Okay. Yeah, there we go. I think this is it. Um, Mercury retrograde. Always very interesting. It'll probably pop in my head. I just can't find it here, but let's see, what was that?
All right, Hang Seng Index extends losses 10% down.
Oh boy.
And I remember reading research, pre-dissertation stuff, back
Mhm.
in like 2010, 2011, and they were saying when it comes to a contagion, it starts in Asia,
Mhm.
and there's two things that happen. There's a big drop in equities, and there's a lot more volatility in the currency market. Now, I've been watching the currency market since Trump came to office. And right now, the Japanese yen is a risk indicator that I look at relative to the USD has been strengthening. And that's usually a sign that there's stress building up in the market when
Yeah.
Japanese yen is strengthening. And it was trading not that long ago, just a couple weeks ago, at about 150, and now it's trading at 145. So if it breaks like 140, then we're going to see like a lot more volatility
Yeah.
in this market. And this is not going to be like 1, 2, 3 day sell off. This is going to be like multiple weeks of sell off.
Well, I'm sensing now I'm tuning into it. I'm sensing it's going to be like September, October 2008. But yeah,
Interesting.
I'm thinking now if it parallels that completely, then by January of 2009, the stock market will be at 6,000 shares. So we'll see what happens. Uh,
Well, just my gut reaction here.
mhm.
It's different. It's different than the crash during 2020. It's different than Lehman, but the numbers that are being published with when the markets open and the sell-off reminds me of 2007,
Yeah.
Asia starting to, and you would hear in the news back then, it was, oh, it's just subprime, don't worry,
Yeah.
it's just subprime. And then the markets kept on selling off, and eventually what happened was that the banks and the trading houses started to have this contagion,
Yeah.
right, that people didn't fully price in on their balance sheet because of the risks tied to all of this swaps and the CDs. the insurance on some of these mortgage-backed securities.
Yeah.
So, all right, and that's the whole problem with AIG. So, so back in the early days where the stress started showing up, like maybe late 2006 and into 2007, I remember watching those Asian sessions, and they just kept on going down, 3, 4, 5%. All right, and then you could sense that there was a stress that was building up, but the narrative was subprime. Don't worry about subprime.
Yeah.
So the numbers that are popping up remind me of that, but the narrative is different. It's almost like they're trying. It's almost as if they're back then. It was don't worry. It's only subprime. The narrative's flipped. It's almost as if they want you to fear because they want to blame a recession on Trump because of the tariffs, because the tariffs is a blow to globalization.
Yeah.
That's how I feel it's being it's almost orchestrated to blame
Yeah.
to blame Trump. Heaven forbid you actually stick a needle in the eye of the globalists, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Well,
so that's the feel I get.
well, Trump, this is the Trump, you had a little honeymoon in the beginning, but this is war. This is, revolution. When the Americans declared independence, the British Empire tried to exert its full force to destroy it. And, the tariffs fundamentally have created the end of globalism. So the Klaus Schwab types, the people who want, because what is going to happen is all those devices that help globalism, and I'll list them off, they're all on the chopping block. The IMF, the WHO, the EU, NATO, all are going to go away. So all these systems that have built up, so are going to go away in maybe this year. Astrologically speaking, there is I've talked on this show about the 7 passes of Pluto over its natal position when starting in 2021 and ending just at the end of last year with the 7th pass in October, just before the elections. So forward motion retrograde, like a a pendulum that's more like a pile, knocking things over, starting in 2021 and ending in 2024, effectively destroyed, dismantled the first 248-year life cycle of the United States of America. So America is going through a death and rebirth. Now, there's an 8th passage that's coming on the 8th of June. And it's the intensity, because it's Pluto, it's very slow. It's already intensifying this conjunction that's coming between Pluto's natal position and 29 degrees Capricorn in 1776, July 4th. But this is different. It's going to create a different energy because this time Pluto is not going to touch and cross right over its natal position. It's going to hang back starting from 3 to 1 degrees before it goes direct again. This thing is going to last the whole year from now on, and June, from the whole 6 months or something. And what it is Pluto is now in Aquarius, and it is reaching close to touch its position, which gave birth to America that we have known 248 years, but not quite touched it, just missing by a degree because it's pulling away slowly on its long transit through Aquarius, which it will be in Aquarius for until 2044. And so in this very time, as children are being born in this new year or at the end of the last year, This is the beginning of the conception and birthing of what in the next 20 years will be what I call the last chance generation of the human race. That it means that, in 20 years' time, they're going to be going to college. In 2044, in 2034, they will be having jobs. In 2054, they will be when now the Pluto is in. Anyway, they will be going. I think it's in Pisces then. So this is mass messaging, changing the whole, redefining what human race is in the 2050s. This generation will have that power to make or break our future. And so I've just been writing about it today, and it will be out in my next report, which is going to come out in the middle of this week. Maybe I'll have to add a few things about this going on as well. But this is part of it. We're talking about things that are going to happen. The first half of 2020s were very interesting, but the second half is revolutionary. That means it's literally, I think I said it before, the scene of Dr. Zhivago in the movie Dr. Zhivago, when Grandpa got the newspaper and it told him that he's a czarist and all that, and the Bolshevik Revolution. And he said, "Oh, they shot the czar. How terrible!" And his whole family. What's it all for? And Dr. Zhivago said, "So that we don't look back. There's no going back. We have to go forward, no matter what." This is the first big push, the tariffs and its reaction, and the economic warfare that's now going on. And it's true, the globalists are, um, how dare this one man, this unpredictable man, catalyze such a upheaval in all their plans to make a one world global neo-fascist state. Um,
Can,
and
can I interject, John? If
sure.
you know what is interesting to me is how in the news with this sell-off that's been happening since he announced the tariffs officially, all right, where they've been framing it as tariff war or tariff warfare. But on Friday, Trump said the patient's okay. We just went through the surgery and we're, in recovery. So from Trump's signaling, at least on Friday, it was more as if it was some sort of clinical operation kind of thing, Well, everyone else, and dealing with the markets, they're viewing it as a tariff war. So,
A
what's your
samurai sword to the Hara.
yeah, maybe. So what's your take on that? You think it's
Well,
just
as I was
nothing
saying
there?
earlier while you were trying to get it all going, and it's great what you're doing. I thank God you're not dyslexic like me, but it has its advantages in prophecy work and dyslexia. But um, Trump is being deeply impacted by this transit of Mercury in retrograde. It's squaring his sun in 22 degrees Gemini and his 17-degree Uranus conjunction. And it has really, he's probably wondering what the heck's going on. It's just he's a little, I mean, he's doing this in everything. He's doing the same thing about this tariff thing, like, oh, here it comes, change everything, and then, oh, it's just clinical, it's okay. That's 180. He's 180ing left and right. I mean, he put out this fire and fury. I mean, talk about what he said in Trump 1.0 when he was working up to threaten North Korea. It's nothing like 2.0. He was like, the worst thing he did was just muse calmly on the podium of the UN General Assembly. Well, there's 25 million North Koreans out there, and God, if they all have to go in a nuclear conflict, well, that's a shame. I don't really want to do that, but it could happen. And then, of course, he made some moves, but he's really In this one, he's more on the, you're going to do this or I'm going to bring down fire and hell and fury on Iran. And I've I'm in this current set of articles. I'm quoting a lot of stuff I said over the years in my Trump book. I was also saying Donald J. Trump doesn't get the Middle East. He doesn't get how he's being played by the Zionists, and he has no clue. The Iranians might be little green men on the moon to him. He doesn't get the Middle East. And so he's grasping at straws that, in a way, that's, I think, why him and Witkoff are friends, because Witkoff, when he was on Tucker Carlson, I really like, my first impressions of Witkoff as a person is that he seems like a really great guy, but he is profoundly as naive about, in fact, somebody somewhere said, he said, well, he's just a New York business Jew, he knows New York. He knows the business. He doesn't really know anything outside of that business. He knows real estate, but um, he doesn't know Russia. He doesn't know Iran. He only watched what the Israeli government showed him of the footage that happened during the initial October 7th incursion of Hamas to raid southern Israel, grab a lot of hostages, and then try to use hostage bargaining to get the 6,000 Palestinians in prisons, men, women, and even children, without trial, just being beaten and tortured there for years, is going to use the 10-to-1 ratio. So they tried to get as many people as they could. And I know what Witkoff saw, because when it was all fresh, one thing you learn in this business when it's fresh, before they start censoring and dropping things out, you watch it as it's happening and you really get to see what's going down. And I'm sure they didn't show him movies of the helicopters, the Israeli helicopters ordered in to strafe and destroy. There's like a Hamas guy here, a Hamas guy there, and there's all these guys and gals that were partying at that rave. They're all running across the fields, and you hear in Hebrew the guy prepping the shots. You hear the and then you see it on the camera because it's a distance when it hits. I saw a whole bunch of the rave guys climbing into a car, and they blew it up with the Israelis blew it up with a rocket, killing them all. I mean, if you look at, I mean, basically, I know stories that Israeli tanks went into some of the towns in the south, and there was one that had a couple of the Hamas guys in there holding hostage uh, of 30 or 40 Israeli citizens. And rather than surround them and eventually get them to surrender, or even trying to save the people, they aimed their tanks and blew the house up, killing just about everybody who's in there, mostly Israelis. The 1,200 people that got killed on that first day, over half of them were killed by friendly fire. And I've shown the videos, I've shown the things. So when he's talking, I could tell that Witkoff had seen not those scenes, those were censored, but all the terrible things that Hamas was doing, like when they were on the road and people are driving by in their cars and they're just having hunting practice on people. I watched them. I watched people getting shot and killed before my eyes on video, and that was happening. And yes, I even talked about the guy who was cutting off the heads of Israeli soldiers. They used to have that video on, and he was even pushing his hand through eyeballs and stuff. It was terrible. But what I also noticed is he was a really pissed off guy, because frankly, are you going to expect people to act human when you put them in an open air prison camp for their whole lives, where you deny them full caloric food intake and water and things for decades? It's just like what happened with the Jewish rebellion in the Warsaw Ghetto. They fought back. They fought like tigers. They fought like beasts because they're being treated like beasts by the SS. And the SS was terrified, just like the Israeli armed forces got terrified with what's going there. So, I mean, without full without full appraisal of everybody opposite to you, if you can't see how the other guy got where he got, you're only going to be myopic, and you can be a really lovely guy like Mr. Witkoff. But I'm thinking, he's not a diplomat. He's no Sergei Lavrov. He is not a Henry Kissinger. He does business, and that is part of the problem. He's an extension of Trump, who is not a politician, being a businessman and trying to be transactional. Just think, like the Gazans are in Palestine, the Gaza Strip, and all the Palestinians are basically difficult tenants that we have to crowd out. Oh, we'll move them somewhere else. Um, he has no clue that one could argue that the people of Palestine actually have been there longer than the Hebrews when they came to claim it, because the name Palestine is predates. It's a very ancient name of the region where people who were pagan then, pagan Semites, worshipped Pallas, the donkey-headed goddess of the land of Palestine. And this predates the Canaanites, the Moabites, and the Amalekites. This goes way, way back. So when people say, "Oh, when poor Golda Meir, one of my heroes of Israeli leadership, says, "Well, there's no such thing as a Palestinian," there's a very brilliant woman being really stupid uh, because of her prejudice. No, if anything, they have first dibs on that land by thousands of years. And they're the people being murdered by the very Europeanized um, Jews of some Zionists of Israel. So, but it's not a Riviera. He's going to make it a Riviera for the rich people, and over the bones of maybe already about 300 to 600,000 dead Palestinians. Um, he just doesn't get at that. And I'll close with this little rave, um, is that Donald Trump's greatest strength is his spontaneous mediumship, but it is unconscious. He's like the centipede, as I was saying in the last episode. He can't think. He has to do with his instincts, but it has its limitations. And there's some really dark folks out there who's got his MO psychically down, and they're making their moves. And I sometimes fear for him. He's got enough luck to survive many a threat, but this is going to be a big test, and it may be all over for Trump's revolution. What'll happen is Trump looked like he was the start of a revolution. Just like Kerensky in Russia, he suddenly, the Russian Revolution was two revolutions. There was the March Revolution, where Kerensky, who became the big guy, he was the Lenin. He was going to make Russia new, and the Tsar had been deposed. And within a few months after that, when Lenin and the Bolsheviks came in, he was nobody. He survived. He ended up being a professor in a university in the San Francisco basin, I think Berkeley, although it might have been one of the other universities. So he must spend most of his long life here in the United States. But Trump could have the same outcome, or it could be worse. I mean, he could be a Mirabeau in the French Revolution, or a Marat, or a Danton, who looks like, as Nostradamus called them all in his prophecies, which are remarkable about the French Revolution, quite chillingly accurate and right out there, naming names and details that happened, that can be documented. So he had his window wide open on the French Revolution. I think it's because he, being a royalist, he really wanted to not hide the fact and the danger from royalists of the future that this was coming. And he, so, a lot of those people who were like, these were the George Washingtons, Thomas Jeffersons of the French Revolution, they all got guillotined. And Robespierre replaced them. And then the Directory replaced him after the Reign of Terror ended. And eventually, the revolution, people were exhausted by the revolution, and they chose a dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte, who became their emperor. But strangely enough, bringing order to an exhausted decade of the French Revolution. So there's that thing to consider too. People, if this doesn't go the way it could go, people might, in a decade of this, get tired and say, "Give us a Napoleon, please." Um, so, so I know it's kind of, I'm going here, there, and everywhere, but this is the energy that we're in right now. And
We have one comment and two questions. So let
okay.
me start with the first question that came in the order. This is from Sir PMC. Ask John about Canada's federal election for April 28th, 2025. Do you think Pierre or Mark will win? It's Pierre.
It's Pierre
Pierre.
Trudeau. It's not Pierre Trudeau, is it? I hope.
No. Will conservative, I think it's Pierre Poilievre, defeat liberal Mark Carney?
I think Carney probably has more of a chance, but
I think Carney's going.
yeah, I think Trump's going to get some of his own back with him. This thing is, again, bullying the Canadians, talking. I mean, you can bully Trudeau because he was not much of a leader. I'm amazed he lasted this long. I mean, God. But you've got, there again, Trump is an ignorant man. He's a brilliant businessman. He's brilliant in things he can do. But I don't think that man's ever sat down and even read about the history of Canada and know the Canadians, except if he did business transactions with them. One of the things that makes him a better, more knowledgeable person about Russians is he's done a lot of business in Russia. And he seems to have an attraction to Slavic people. Two of his three wives were Slavs. The first was Czechoslovakian. The second was the Slovene. And that Baron, her child for Trump, the first language he learned was Slovene. I've seen pictures of him and movies of him when he was a little kid, rattling off in Slovenian. It was cute. Um, so he's got a closeness and a connection with the Slavic peoples, and that's because of him being instinctive. He's never going to become knowledgeable about things. He's just going to jump in and see what he can do, and sometimes it works very well. But as great as it sometimes can work, other times it can collapse.
All right, let me ask the other question here. This is from GDI. Does John know anything about the Einstein-Rosen bridge or negative energy tech for the future? I don't know anything about this.
You mean like Newell energy? Like well, it's funny. It's like it's even in theories in Star Trek a bit. This whole idea of antimatter. That which is not matter to count to, or as the punk rock band used to say, antimatter. What does it matter? Well, it doesn't matter. It's the thing. It's the no matter theoretically with the matter. Everybody's been getting out how they don't think there's any dark matter in the universe.
I don't know. I thought the Einstein-Rosen bridge had something to do with warping of space and time,
Folding space.
And I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up, but I got so many things going on here. I don't want to.
I know it's a little. Bear with us, guys. It's a lot going on.
No, I don't want to mess with the feet.
We're probably not ready for an Einstein
Yeah,
theory
I
of relativity
really, I mean,
type.
if I change anything with these monitors, we're literally going to full space and time.
Yes.
Okay, so let me just
Was
go
there a
to,
third comment or question?
there was a comment, and that was from Rumble, and this individual was saying that, and it was dovetailing into what you were saying about the revolution, and where he felt that we're living in, another 1776. He feels the same way that you feel, that we're living in another.
Actually, I wouldn't call it 1776. I would call it 1789. The French, it's going to be more like the French Revolution.
Well,
I
that's probably true. The take that I have with this, and I did this on one of my shows recently, and when you were talking about, we finished that first cycle with Pluto, and we're going into this new cycle, and we're near our 250th anniversary for the country. That Trump, going back to the early beginnings of the revolution for the United States, it
mm,
was it was about, it eventually turned into self-determination, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But I would say that the true catalyst was the stamp tax.
economics.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
it
was
was taxes.
economics.
Right.
It's a very parallel
Right, right,
situation.
right, right.
That
So,
part I
so at
agree
that
is
time, it was the King of England. England was a major world power. That they were globalization. So, so you go forward 250 years. Now we got Trump in office. There's elements of a George Washington thing about him. Even with his hair and the way he walks with his long coat when he's walking
yeah.
down the street or whatever. But uh, but so the tariff war, and going after globalization, he's not so poetic about it, but it is really about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness
Yeah.
for Americans. And it kind of cut at the knees globalization. So I see that what's happening, this new cycle of 250 years or 248 years,
Yeah.
it is really to fight a global order, just like
Mhm.
our ancestors, the ones that fought in the revolution, our country fought a global order.
That's right.
So I
It
that's
was the
where the
first
parallel
burgeoning
that's
middle
where the parallel I
class.
see is.
It was the other thing that these Pluto cycles created was a new class of people, a middle class. And it was only in Europe and here that that happened. And then the issue of taxation without representation. Well, it's now got its karmic echo of tarifation without representation, some would complain. Um, and, revolutions, they blunder, they club and blunder, they, blow things up. This revolution, and there's a lot of victims of revolutions that kind of get trampled in the stampede. For instance, there's a lot of people that were wrongly fired by Doge. But then Doge, and there was even situations where even in the Kennedy papers being more revealed, the people the people that were checking to make sure the redactions were correct didn't do a very good job. And many people, one person in particular who was just not even involved in the assassination, but involved in some trials about it, his social security number was not redacted. So now it's his social security number is all over the world. So revolutions are in a hurry. And frankly, I don't know of any revolution that's a slow paced revolution. I mean, even the term revolve, means you're spinning something over. And so the other side of revolution, which we were fortunate in America because we were so isolated from the rest of the world at that time, to have our Pluto and Capricorn return moment where we could kind of create the dream, the theory, the architecture, this is where we're going, ideas that we spoke about earlier. But right after, I've said before that by 1777, Pluto in that time of the return, it immediately went into Aquarius. And what then happened is the fight and the blood and the struggle to beat the British Empire began. It really began in earnest. I mean, yes, the revolution started kind of in 1775, but it became all 13 colonies in 1777. And that's when the British could pull all their resources that they could bring to fight us. And it actually was a world war between the French monarchy and the British monarchy trying to dominate the world. So technically, World War I was happening, and we were one of the campaigns. We've already fought World War III. It's mistakenly called World War II, and this is World War IV. One could argue that. So it's it's revolutions kind of push people aside sometimes as much as it tries to help people become free. The French Revolution did that. The French Revolution started really well, but because the powers that be, because that's where the real power in the world was then, Europe, center of power, it was starting to control the world then, like we've tried ever since in 1789. It's interesting also that it was also triggered by economic suppression caused by climate, just like we have going on now. It was just the beginning of the warming of the earth, but one of the things that happened exactly almost to the year and date before the Bastille was stormed in 14th July 1789. They called it, I've been reading translations of French newspaper journals from the whole period. And there was a thing I stumbled on when I was working on why did Nostradamus call the French Revolution La Tombe, the whirlwind. A lot of people misinterpret that to mean Trump. Trump. It's not. Again, you've got to know your 16th century French to understand what he's saying at least a bit. And so it was called the whirlwind. It happened in July. A series of big tornadoes went across central France, caused a lot of damage, kind of damage you see in Alabama and Nebraska and Kansas. That's freaky for Europe, but it happened, and it destroyed the harvest in 1788. And it was because of the destruction of that harvest that bread was short, so it was expensive, like our food is getting expensive now. And it got to a point of crisis, which it could now, where when people can't eat and their families can't be fed and they can't, that's when revolution happens. It takes no Nostradamus to predict that. It's
Well,
always over bread.
to prove your point, even in corporate, when you have like restructuring that's going on with a complex organization, there are different variables, but you don't really know the weights. So you do a little change here and a little change there, and there's a multiplication effect that takes place because of this factorial equation of the organization that you're changing. So I feel that what is happening since Trump came into office, he's changing things, and and this goes back to what you were saying with this whole retrograde and this magnification effect that's going on with Trump. He's not used to that. What he's doing is actually amplified at a much larger amplitude than in prior years of his life.
Yep.
So he's changing these variables, and there is this compound effect that he's just not used to. And I'll tell you, I'm looking at these numbers. I've been watching financial markets for a long
Yeah.
time. For I mean a long time. All right, and I'll tell you the numbers that are coming through here in the Asian session: 9% down, 6% down.
Wow.
Right now the U.S. equity market is stabilized. It wasn't stabilized earlier, but it's stabilized. But I
Early.
suspect that once the European session gets online,
Yeah.
when we're asleep, that volatility will start to increase. So the New York session in the morning may be pretty tumultuous. But I mean, the Shanghai index, CSI, Hang Seng, they're all down by a lot. So there's this. I, I think that I think in the long run, the world and the United States will be better off by chipping away at this Ponzi scheme of globalization, right? Or however we want to phrase it. But we have a Ponzi scheme that's going on in the equity market. We have a Federal Reserve that keeps on pumping money into a system where you have literally the drug dealer is the Federal Reserve, and and the opium addicts are the
They
traders in
are.
Wall Street, and they are just begging for more free money. you know
It's like Lenin shot the Tsar and the family.
right.
It just blew it all away. And now, for better and worse, we have to move forward.
Right.
Trump put tariffs opposite to what worked with McKinley. It was Glenn Deason, by the way, Glenndiesen. It was his show that had Peter Schiff
Oh,
on yesterday. And Schiff was saying, he said that what Trump has done is he's accelerated he doesn't understand tariffs the way well, I'll just give you a kind of quick overview for everybody that doesn't know that tariffs seemed to work back in President McKinley's time, and Trump is very pro. He's like his hero, so much so that he wants to rename Denali Mount McKinley. So he is McKinley was working with a industrial base of the United States that had taken many decades and was actually even aided by fighting the Civil War, at least the northern industries and all, that actually built the economy larger. But this economy still needed protection because it was, it could have collapsed if the world powers in Europe were wanting to get into our market, and they were going to compete by making the products our people were struggling to make um, cheaper if they bought German goods or English goods or French goods. And McKinley McKinley had something we don't have anymore. We don't have we have to rebuild our economy, our industrial base, because we sold it away to China. Don't blame China if you're fool enough to sell all your industrial base, and don't be as foolish as Clinton who think that this country can be the way it is as a service economy. That's just laughable. But what happened is over 30, 40 years, starting in the 80s, that's what the movie Wall Street was all about. It was the backstory to it. We started selling off our industrial base, and we lost it. And so we don't have if this was 20 years later than now, when we, like the Russians, rebuilt their industry after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia's just finished this process that we haven't even started, and we'll have to do it. Is that the the Soviet Union collapsed, and then what happened is gullible Gorbachev and drunken Yeltsin basically surrendered their intelligence to whatever the US people, these carpetbaggers, were saying about all you need to do is privatize the Soviet Union. And again, it was almost like these are people not as interesting as Trump, being as spontaneous and not unknowledgeable about things. And and what happened is Russia went into the worst time it had since the time of troubles in the 13th century, where half of Russia died and it was terrible. And but they somehow survived it in the occupation of the Polish, Lithuanian Empire and all of that. Well, Russians consider the 1990s the second time of troubles, and uh, it it was dying. And around 1999, Putin was in the cabinet of Yeltsin. And Yeltsin's an interesting Russian character. He's a classic Dostoevskian character. He's an oaf, he's a fool. But underneath that, sometimes is really a man with vision. And fortunately, he had a moment of clarity where he summoned Putin in and said, I'm going to retire. I can't do this anymore. And I'm going to have you be the president in my place and finish my term. And Putin was shocked. He was, I'm not ready for this. He's in his 40s. And Yeltsin said, look, I even have family members in my cabinet here, and I don't trust them. You're the only person here who's not corrupted by all of this. And so you're it. And so Putin took it. And he eventually, it took him 20, 25 years it's only just now that the Russian economy and another war has jumped it, just like the Civil War did with ours. It's only now that the Russian economy and industrial base has returned. Now that's, 1990 to, 2025, 2022. I mean, the 2020s is when it happens. So this takes a long time. You just don't do lend lease and think you can be arsenal of democracy. We were able to do the arsenal of democracy because in the 1930s we were like China. We were the largest industrial based economy going. So we could retool and do all that because we had done since the Civil War all, and since McKinley protected it by by putting really expensive tariffs on the British, on the Russians, on everybody, so that our people would buy American made goods. Guess what, folks? If our people think, I've been hearing it a little bit in the last week, they think, okay, well, then people will just buy American and that'll make things better. We don't have the industries, we've sold them. So, what we're going to end up doing is, and if I understand what Peter Schiff was saying, um, is that we have given our debt is basically thrown through the US dollar on everybody else in the world. But we do that because it's not that people are unfair with us. We opened up. This is how we can keep this graph, this this crazy definite deficit spending going, is that we keeping our governments too big, everything that we've got to cut down, so we start saving when we don't need to save. We just throw it out there with a dollar. But we've been taking the US dollar and weaponizing it so bad now that the BRICS is now happening, and people are saying we'd love to be with the dollar, but we're tired of being persecuted and screwed by the way you guys sanction us. So bye bye. And to finish this point, if we're going to turn back to America, people are going to have a big shock coming. They're going to see to what extent we don't have the industrial base that McKinley had to protect. We don't have it. And so if we're not buying from everybody outside and their industries and stuff, guess what? That all that financialization of our debt is coming right back into our real half-dead economy. And it's going to be tough. Now, please watch Schiff and Glenn Deason. He'll say it a lot more clear than I can, but it's quite a show. Um, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I just got a text message from Miss Taiwan,
Uh,
and she also stated that Ackman, who is a institutional investor, he has his own fund, that he thinks that Trump went a little bit overboard with the tariffs, but he's a buyer. He's buying into the market.
yeah.
So my take is that there's going to be enough optimists in the that are trying to get deals and buying those deals as this market starts to sell off in the United States. I don't think that's the case in Asia. I think in the case in Asia and maybe even in Europe, where this may actually put them into a recession, and that will have a reverberation effect into the US economy and lead to maybe a global depression.
Well, I've always been saying that a global depression is necessary, just like recessions are necessary, but a global depression is a more extreme version of it. I mean, it's just like what we used to do in California, my native state, when I used to live there, people were complaining about how um, they didn't want to burn any of the underbrush because of forests, because it was make them not so pretty and people wouldn't want to camp there. But frankly, y- the natural way of things is that nature with its fires does burn the brush. But if you have too much brush, growing over decades that doesn't go through that natural process, then the whole forest burns down. And so there's a little of that going on with this. The yeah, I just let's see. I'm trying to think how it is that I could say this. It's the I don't think that's going to happen with China. What it's going to do is it's going to accelerate the BRICS. And the other thing too is that Russia, even if China lost its oil, Russia could absorb selling all of its oil to China. So it has its energy. The thing that's helped Russia so much is that the ruble has never, all the people in the West that wanted to take it down with their sanctions had not one whit of understanding that the ruble is a domestic currency. It's always bought and sold inside. It's not an international currency. So it wasn't affected by any of that. Because again, the fatal flaw of every European that tries to take down Russia is they project their ignorance about Russia since 1242 AD. The idiot Europeans have been doing this. And every time they go after Russia, they get completely destroyed and they do not learn. And we're going through, I think, the last permutation of that, which will end with this Ukrainian proxy war with Russia. Um, Go ahead.
Oh, we have a call in from X Spaces.
Okay.
Thank you, Paul. I was just calling in because the one thing I don't think that's been brought up quite yet is the corruption. And one of the things that's being exposed from Doge is something that Trump was originally voted in to actually drain the swamp. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a growing frustration among the American people that that's not happening. And so to me, one of the things that's different this time around is that the government is 30 to 40% of our GDP. And so when you're trying to look at if that's a productive producing segment of the economy, one could argue it's absolutely not. So we're kind of at that Minsky moment where something has to be done to actually drain the swamp and remove these unproductive rent-seeking part of the economy and move it towards those that actually make things. So this is sort of like the necessary switch that's been a consequence of the corruption of our institutions, not just here, but Europe is even in worse condition. Yeah. And China is going through a democratic collapse as well, a demographic collapse. So China is going to also be in the similar situation, especially say we go through some type of contraction, since we're the biggest consumer of the products, that they're going to need war as a distraction just to maintain Xi's power structure, which is why if I were Xi, I would probably look to take Taiwan at this point in time. But
Well,
how many wars has China fought? How many wars has China fought in the last few hundred years? Wars of choice, wars where they attacked somebody.
Well, could you say what's happening? Who's bringing the fentanyl into our country?
No, answer my question. Don't
Well,
prevent
but because war is
answer my
different this
question.
time. No, I missed the question. I'm saying war is very different this time around. In fact, they said
No, you're talking about China having to go to war to keep its economy going. Am I hearing you right?
No, I said to distract them from a contraction in their economy. So you put yourself on some type of war.
Sounds very American. That's what America does. China's a very different fish.
So tell me, one second. So who in your estimation is bringing fentanyl into this country? Is China has no hand in that? And it's, for instance, working on the bioweapons program. Yeah. Were they not working? I mean, this is part of the whole thing. The war looks very different this time around. And China understands that it's very difficult to take the U.S. on any type of direct conflict. So when we're talking about informational warfare, bioweapon warfare, even drugs moving into the country, that you could argue that we're already in a war with them.
Well, and we've already been waging that war on China as well. So it's almost like getting our own back a little bit.
Well, again, it's not the American people. This is what I keep talking about, these rogue institutions that we need to drain from Washington. And that's the frustration among the American people, because you have Rumsfeld comes out and says pre 9/11, we can't find $2.3 trillion. And we talk, you have someone like Assange saying, well, Afghan is just basically a means to launder U.S. taxpayer money. Ukraine
a lot of what we do is that, and the tariff thing may have actually cut that flow off, which will be forcing us then to get a little even straighter than just draining the swamp, looking fundamentally at the problem. It's a structural problem. I mean, we have financialized our economy at the cost of the economy that makes things.
But John, let me
finish. So that financialization, when they broke the wall that separated basic economic banks with stock market and made it all kind of mixed together, that when Clinton did that was the beginning of all this mess that we're in now. So one of the things that has to happen is something like Glass-Steagall has to be put back. So there's a firewall between the real economy and its investments that makes things, that makes jobs, that makes wealth, and all that financial place, which is all now in the same bed together. So the other thing we got to look at too, have you noticed that, we went through USAID and cleaned a lot of stuff out. That was good. But why is Doge stopping with the military-industrial complex? Because that, again, we're getting to the heart of this cabal that makes it's the Pentagon. I was waiting, okay, if Trump can really get in and start doing what he did to USAID, that would be significant, because there is at least, we've taken out 1 trillion of waste, but there is so much waste in the military industrial complex in the Pentagon. Why isn't Doge going in there now? What's pausing it? Why is the news not talking about it? Is this another place where the swamp is fighting back? I think it is.
I think I want to interject to prove John's point here. In the news recently, we heard Rand Paul and Ted Cruz almost be defensive and go against Trump's tariff policies when they were being interviewed in the media. Saying that they're inflationary, they're not going to work, it could lead to a recession or a depression. So, typically I would think Rand Paul is not a swamp creature. Ted Cruz, not, he probably is, right? He has large positions in Bitcoin, in not just in Bitcoin, but also in miners and in exchanges. So he benefits if there is a market rally, especially with companies that are tied somehow to Bitcoin. Well, Bitcoin's selling off, and almost every single equity in the in the U.S. market is down. So basically, Ted Cruz is losing money. So he's positioned himself almost like a swamp creature, and then they spin it as, well, we can't keep on going down this road because we may lose in the midterm election and lose seats to the Democrats. So two individuals that I would say MAGA looks towards to push a Trump agenda in Congress, or in the Senate in this case, seems to be retreating a little bit.
That's how deep it goes.
So these, I'm not so sure that you can even really get the swamp creatures out unless you go totally nuke. You can't drain the swamp. You need to nuke the swamp. I mean, because the people that we go towards to try to push policies in on the Hill that we would say are conservative policies have tendency to lean towards the swamp creatures. So I don't know who to trust anymore. When Rand Paul, you can't even trust Rand Paul to bring down the global new world order. I don't know who you can trust.
That is the thing that's we're all now having a reality of revolutionary times.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the kind of things that happen. People who, the French Revolution began with the idea of keeping the king, and he promised he would never leave his subjects. And so they kept the king, and they turned him into Monsieur Capet, from the Capet, the earliest name of the Bourbon ancient roots. So he was Citizen Capet, no longer the king, but he was basically a constitutional monarch. Where things started to go south was after the French Republic was created. The king tried to escape. It's one of Nostradamus's most famous prophecies because he nails everything in it. Even the index is talking about the date, which it doesn't always happen in the quatrain indexes, but it does sometimes. And he named the force of Rien, where the king went, and he named the town where the king was caught up by the Republican guards, Varennes. He said that the king would be dressed as a monk in gray. He was dressed in the costume of a Carmelite monk. They wear the broad gray hat and gray robe. The queen white stone was representing the diamond necklace scandal of Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France. And all these things were kind of coming together. And then he named the man who was the governor of Varennes, who was also an oil merchant. And he named him Salsa. He named it with the old French spelling with an L rather than sauce. And then it comes up again in another with salsa. Narbonne and salsa, we have oil for our blades, because Narbonne didn't die, but salsa was guillotined during the Reign of Terror. And he was a hero, before that. And so he not only named him again, but his profession. He was an oil merchant. So we have oil for our blades. So the problem is that Nostradamus, being a royalist, he wasn't just a little biased, but he was a little accurate. He called all the leadership of the French Revolution the headless idiots, which almost all of them became indeed headless, one after the other, including Robespierre. He was the last one to be guillotined during the Reign of Terror, when they'd had enough of him. And then what happened, of course, is the revolution kind of coasted for a while for the next 5 years under the Directory, but it was kind of falling apart, and actually it needed a coup from Napoleon to kind of restore some kind of order. I mean, here's the problem. Decades ago, I had arguments with people about this, and a lot of them were people who were very pro-democracy and never imagined. I said, when the 2020s happen, you remember this day, I told him, when the 2020s happen and chaos starts happening and the economy and the structural broken swamp issues start happening, you talk about being democratic and following democracy. I bet that in those days you will call for fascism, because totalitarianism, as the Chinese are trying to teach the world with their experiment, is the Chinese are trying to do the famous statement of the perfect government, if it's harmonized and balanced, is a government that is both democratic and it's sometimes necessarily totalitarian. There are some things democracy can't do very well. So, I come back to the famous story of Lucius Cincinnatus in the early Roman Senate, when Latium, little province of Latium, was the extension of the Roman sphere of the world. It wasn't a great empire, surrounded by hostile Italian tribes. And one of them had slaughtered their army, the Roman army. And so the Senate is trying to find a way in this emergency. So they had a real state of emergency. So they were trying to find a way to sort this all out. And they realized that they were seeing that this kind of democracy they had, everybody was not a cook. They were all chefs, and they all had their ideas, and nobody was surrendering to anything. And the Italians are coming. So they decided, okay, we've got to give for a limited time one of our own dictatorship. And Cincinnatus became the first dictator of Rome by law, given the fascists, the twigs that surround a hatchet, which you see all over the Washington, D.C. You see it in the Capitol building. You see it. You'll look in the walls, marble walls. You'll see those sticks, and you'll see the little hatchets. That is the fascist. That's where we get the term fascist from. But it was a symbol of the state's power under the democratic Roman Senate. And so they gave him 6 months to solve the problem. They gave him power of life and death over everybody. He was a complete legal autocrat. And of course, he was a really honorable man, but everybody's worried, give power to somebody and the corruption that's hiding inside them. It's not power that corrupts people. It's the corruption once given power that comes out. It's already there. And they were already worried. What's he going to do? Is he going to now beat the Italian army and then turn this army on us? Kind of like what, Caesar did and stuff, and many centuries later during the great civil war of the Roman Empire that turned it in from a republic into a Roman Empire. Because at a certain point, and the British kind of understood this when they sold off their empire. They had a choice in the 50s. They could either keep the empire, but they'd lose their democracy, just like the Roman Republic did. The Rome got too big. Democracy is local. You can't, that's why a world full of a lot of smaller democracies as individual sovereign states in a Senate of the world might work. Because democracy never works when it gets bigger and bigger. It's not efficient enough to work, and therefore there's temptations to make it work with totalitarianism. And so anyway, in 2 months he formed a new army, trained it, and defeated the Italian tribes. And he came back to the Senate after the victorious parade in Rome, and he came with the fascists cradled in his arms. And they said, the Speaker of the Senate said, well, according to our laws, you are the tribune, you are the dictator of Rome, and you can remain dictator for another 4 months. and so what his answer was, he handed the symbol of power back to the Senate, to the speaker, and said, the emergency's over. Let's go back to democracy, shall we? You know, we're coming in times, and I've been writing about this since 1990, that there will be times in the 2020s when we have to find the times of emergency where we have to find our Cincinnatus. We get the term citizen from him. We sometimes democracy everything has its limits. So a wise person has to accept that and then find a way to create something where there are times. Now the Chinese are trying to do this with free economy. They're the only Chinese communists, and the only communists that really understood Das Kapital by it means you have to have capital, enough wealth to have a communist society, as Marx tried to do. And he, in his Das Kapital, he only saw the British Empire and the United States as the only two nations that could pull off a truly socialist communist agenda, because they had the wealth, the capital to do so. If he had lived to see Russia and impoverished China become communist states, he would have kind of rolled his eyes and said, well, I'm happy that's happening, but there's only one thing you people have in your future. The only thing you're going to share is poverty, because you need capital to make this work. Now, the Chinese went through all the horrors of the Cultural Revolution, and after Mao died, Deng Xiaoping became the next premier of secretary of the Communist Party, and he started the road of the four freedoms, or the four, I can't remember the term, but anyway, he started the long road of China's growth into capital, into in the actual volume of buying and selling, China has been the #1 economy since 2016, just as Mao had predicted in 1952. I don't know where he got that from, but he did. So when I hear a lot of people talk about China, but my sources that I try to find are people in China, people in the Communist Party, when they're asked these kind of questions like, how do you manage that? Are you managing it? And it's really quite a thing, because China is always a culture that wants to find harmony between opposites. What's more opposite than democracy, free market, and totalitarian communist party? Now, the other thing too is that the communist the party does not allow any capitalists to join it. That's how. And the other thing too is that China is very helpful. The fact that most of the Chinese control their local situations in their elections. They control that. So, and what happens is they control a committee, and then those committees choose, and it's kind of a meritocratic system as well, where those who have the experience choose who can run this thing or a higher thing, all the way up to the Congress in Beijing. But the biggest tug of war is the more they gain the success of wealth and democracy in the streets, then there's this pull between the two, where is the Communist Party now going to sit on that because it's getting too hot? So the Chinese, they say to me, they're saying we're doing something that's, we don't know if we'll be able to pull it off, but this long-term struggle between finding a balance between totalitarianism and free markets and democracy is exactly the petri dish that China is now today. Must be watched in that regard.
So John, we had Mr. T on the X Spaces, but he left. He wanted to talk. I gave him the mic, but he left. So Mr. T left. So if Mr. T,
so who was Mr. T? Was that
I
the
don't
guy?
know. I have no idea who Mr. T was. So Mr.
Come
T,
back, Mr. T.
Mr. T, if you're listening, come back and we'll give you the mic. And
come back, Shane.
And Don just left. he wanted to continue talking, but
I gotta, for the sake, I have to say this, that for the sake of, this happens on other shows too, and I'm kind of new at this. It's when you have a question, so just so other people have a chance to ask questions, ask your question, I'll answer it, but don't think that this is going to be like a debate that goes for an hour or something. This is, let other people have a chance to chime in. I mean, sometimes we'll do that, but don't let it get into a habit.
Well, we missed Mr. T. So if Mr. T is listening, please come on back. I did give you the mic, but you left. So
when did he leave?
He left about 5 minutes ago.
Okay.
But hopefully he comes back. But here's Don again. He wanted to interject, but Don, you have the speaker.
Yeah, sorry, John, for making this into debate. I'm really not. I'm just challenging some of your positions.
Yeah, I know, but I want you to kind of be a little more sensitive to other people. I mean, I love talking to you, but remember, there's other people.
Okay, well, let me ask my question, John. My question to you, because
you don't throw it off. Respond to what I'm saying. Then we'll listen to your question. I mean, don't. Oh yeah, that's true. No, this is something that I love what you say and all, but I don't like the way you kind of hog the airwaves. What do you think about
John,
that?
you look at my time compared to yours, it's actually about a fifth. So my question to you is about China's position. You seem to think
get it.
They've turned. I'm asking to build up to my question. You don't see China as a threat at all.
No, I didn't say that. You're projecting that. I didn't say that. But I look at China, I try to look at China as China sees itself. And I think that would help a lot for us to at least know how to fight them or find ways to live with them. That's my answer.
Okay, well then, so I'm not necessarily disagreeing. I'm saying the problem that I see, and maybe I'm asking the question is people's attention span, in its ability to try to figure out who the enemy is that we're trying to fight. And to that extent, China is someone that I think has been influenced by this deep state cabal, where they moved a lot of intellectual property to them because they realized.
Talk about an attention span. You're starting to hog the thing again. This is not the Don and John show.
Okay.
And I am asking you to.
Okay. Do you see China's basically use of social media?
You just brush that off. So I'm done.
All right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right.
Sometimes one has to do this, and I mean, it has good things to say, but I'd really, let's. If you guys want more things to happen, call in.
Mr. T, if you're out there, come on in. Come on down. You're on the Price is Right. But I've been watching the markets here, and what is interesting, as you were talking with Don, was that Taiwan made a statement where they want to remove their tariffs and have no tariffs with the United States. All right, so they're trying to normalize and really have free trade. Now, what is interesting is them positioning themselves that way, while President Xi positioned himself on Friday with retaliatory tariffs. So you're seeing that fissure, all right, that's starting to start. And I've been worried about this ever since even during COVID, that Xi is positioning himself with the flash pan in Taiwan, where it could lead to a major war in the Pacific. And I'm not so sure that our Navy is prepared for it. So all right, Taiwan seems to be negotiating based on what the news came out in the Asian session, be aligning more with Trump. We're already selling military equipment We already have Marine bases, in the Philippines, and we're working with our allies in that region to try to stabilize and do these war games and protect that island. China does a retaliatory tariff, and it now seems that we're closer, back to your point with World War IV, we're getting closer and closer to this flash pan moment in Taiwan. And tariffs may actually be the catalyst.
It could be. But also I've also been seeing a lot of countries are saying, yeah, we'll drop. I mean, this is one of the things Trump's trying to do with this kind of confrontational way of his. And he was clucking happily about it the other day, that a lot of countries want to erase their tariffs, or if they had tariffs that Trump and the Americans felt unfair, they're reducing it. So that's the other thing. So in a way, that could be happening with Taiwan, although the Taiwanese government, the president is the president of Taiwan, does not have the Congress. I mean, he doesn't have this, whatever they call the parliament is run by another party that actually wants to be part of China. Technically, we've already declared that they are a part of China. This has been in our writ since 1979, and now that Trump's erased that little point out of the State Department's stuff, doesn't change that. Or maybe it was Rubio, but so that's one of the positives, is that a lot of tariffs will actually go down. I mean, this shock tomorrow, which is already tomorrow in Asia. This is the one thing that's interesting about revolutions, when suddenly everything we know is kind of turned over upside down. This first met with shock and horror and freak out, but it also is an opportunity for people to think out of the box, because the box just got kicked away, and the United States is, as Schiff was saying, what Trump's done with the tariffs, in his view, is he's accelerated the time we will have to face paying up for all our financial finagling and all that. It's coming. The tariffs, he believes, are going to actually, maybe I would add, in his 4 years, create a situation where we've been kicking our debt situation down the road, and now we got to pay it off. Now, I have this unusual idea that may or may not happen, but when I look at the $80 trillion private debt of the United States people and the $34 trillion public debt that everybody's always talking about, but nobody wants to even touch the issue of the 80 trillion, you can't pay that off. You have to erase it. You have to have a jubilee. Now, it's not the way the Babylonians intended jubilees to happen. It was only if things were going a little 20% or something, and then the king would forgive the debt. But we have to have a year zero in the United States. And yes, people are going to lose their shirts. It's like what happened to Greenland when the recession happened in 2008. The Greenland government decided we were going to just basically disfund a lot of the government, put the people that did this in jail, and basically we will make sure that basic social systems are financed so that we don't have a complete collapse of our civilization. Of course, they had the advantage of only having 250,000 people on a small island. They don't have, this democracy being local, being small. They don't have 320, 340 million people with another 10 million people who are illegally here or more. So they actually recovered. It was painful for about 6 months, but Greenland recovered from the recession of 2008 rather well. But they did the draconian thing at the beginning, So we're seeing theories tested now that have never been tested. I mean, maybe Peter Schiff will be wrong. Uh, I don't think he will be, but I wasn't. It wasn't like I was enjoying what I was hearing, but it was just my gut was saying, yeah, that's probably true. It's just like what Scott Ritter did, got himself in a lot of trouble last week. I was listening to him reason, and it's actually something that I was concerned about, and I talked about it in September of last year when the Iranians started to publicly say, after we lost the JCPOA, we've been enriching uranium at 30%. Now, you only do that if you're thinking of building an atomic bomb. And because you only have to go another 40%. No, you have to go to 90% to be at weapons grade. So Ukraine was already talking about, well, now we're going to build a bomb. Now they haven't built a bomb, but I can tell you that when Pakistan was trying to gain parity against India and try to build a bomb, I was in the middle of one of the first kind of Cuban Missile crises they had in 1990, and it's one of these things that it was the same reason the Soviet Union seriously thought about disindustrializing China with a thermonuclear war, a limited thermonuclear war. So because once the bomb was created in 1964, and at that time Russia and China were not friends, you have a window where when does the window come where they can then take their atomic bomb and put it in a missile? And when is the moment when they have intercontinental reach or even regional ballistic reach, like in what's happening in the Middle East? So I've seen scenarios where this has come up. And yes, people can say, hey, and they're not wrong. Iran can say and do whatever it wants. It's not technically that they have a bomb, but one person might take the evidence of them getting up to 30% enrichment way down there in that mountain factory as grounds to do a preventative attack. Um, that, like the Russians, the Soviet Union almost did in 1969. That's where all those border things were going on in 69. They were going to go to war with Mao's China and curtail the Chinese nuclear weapons program. And when I saw the Iranians, I think made a mistake when they started openly talking about gaining a bomb. That's a miscalculation with the crazy people that are running Jerusalem right now, because that gives them ground they're just dying for some kind of threat like that to be allowed, giving them the chance to go in and nuke Iran. And I think a lot of people are misunderstanding Scott's point of view. I think I understand what he's saying. He's just looking at the truth of it. And he said, look, he said, I don't want Iran to be destroyed. I'm not for this. I'm just trying to work out the problem. And that's the thing, even in our discussions, working out the problem, like with China, talking about Don and China, and it's better to know more about where the Chinese are coming from than just what you hear on the Western side. Um, it's one of the reasons why Napoleon made the mistake of invading Russia, Hitler invading Russia, Charles the 12th invading Russia, the Teutonic Knights in 1242 invading Russia, and NATO encroaching right up onto Russia's frontier, saying, now we want Ukraine. But if they get Ukraine, it's only a few hundred miles from Moscow, and now you've got your missiles of NATO 4 minutes from Moscow. It was only a minute more from Cuba in 1962 to obliterate Washington, D.C. And Kennedy would have gone to war if he couldn't get it. Or he was not shy about it. They were planning to invade Cuba. They didn't know about the Frog missiles that were commanded by battalions. It's very weird that the Soviets would have an oversight about that because it was so controlled from the top down. And here's battalion commanders who, if they wanted to, could fire a tactical nuclear weapon at the United States fleet as it's landing people in Cuba. We only found out decades later when the Soviet Union collapsed, when for a brief moment the KGB files and stuff were available, that this could have happened. This is one of those nasty surprises that happens in such things that people don't anticipate. So, we're in a place where nasty surprises could happen again, because what happened to Kennedy is exactly happening to Vladimir Putin and the Russian people. And it's just as existential a crisis as it was for Kennedy. So, a little bit, I want to flow into this situation of the Ukrainian issue. The Ukrainian missile crisis could come back again, because now, as I predicted, unfortunately, the European part of NATO is talking itself into sending troops. They're going to start sending troops now into this conflict. I'm glad to say that one of the biggest ones that could have done it and really made it dangerous, the Poles are not, they have cold feet about that. That's good. But the French and the British, well, they're going in. The Italians, Meloni, she's a little, I don't know about this. One of the greatest contributions in modern history is that the Italians make love, not war. And I know if people are going to get push your buttons about that, but it's I wish all armies fought like the Italian army. Made love, not war. Then there wouldn't be any war. But anyway, that's just a joke. Don't take me seriously. Take me sincerely. So it's so that's coming back, but Russia is about to unleash its offensives. There are 600,000 Russians on the 2,000-kilometer line, 1,400-mile line. There are at least 300,000 or more that are way far back, that are starting to make some moves and to do breakouts. And so I think that in maybe late April, beginning of May, when this rather light mud season that's happened, no global warming. Just look at the way Russia's been warmer. Yeah, we were all cold in America, but they didn't hardly have any snow, Russia, in this winter. And that's saying something. So the ground will be good. The ground will be good early. And we're going to see this situation in Ukraine come to its climax in the spring and summer of this year. So we may be having to wrestle with two places coming to their climax. But I will say this, because it's something I have been feeling. I'm talking a little bit about it. What you're saying about this whole test, and I want to get back to China. Why is China doing this? My first impression was that China's tariff is trying to put the pressure on the United States. But it might be a ruse to see just how far it goes in the Taiwan government. And if they see that it's going too far, I'm feeling that China will just go over and take it. Might even do it this year, right in the middle of all the other things going on. I mean, if you've got your Navy in a strategically stupid war with Iran, which you can't win, you could destroy Iran, but Iran will sink our Navy. And the whole logistic issue that the Taiwan thing does is even more crazy. I just was writing about it today, that I was writing and changing the meaning of the forever war. A lot of the MAGA movement have said, we want Trump to get us out of these forever wars. And some people on X or staunch MAGA people are saying, you know what? If he sends us in to fight a war with Iran, I'm going to publicly apologize to all the voters for voting for him. And these are like heavy duty MAGA, movers and shakers saying stuff like this on X. I would say to the X people, communicate with Donald. Make your feelings known. Remind him why you voted for him. And that was not to get into another forever war, because this forever is a different kind of forever. This will be, whether it's the Taiwan Straits or it's the Persian Gulf. America is, I've been looking at our history this today, and I have never seen any military disaster and defeat that America has had that could like rival Waterloo or 1812 for Napoleon, or these. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen America lose in a big war like Germany did in two. But this could be about as close to what that looks like for us. It's the kind of thing where what's forever is that you're forever going to be seen as the bad guy, to use an American terminology, by the rest of the world. I mean, already this thing is looming on us because of the way the last president and now the current president are kind of looking the other way, as right now, millions of Palestinians are being systematically starved to death with no water. It's shut off by the Israeli government. Um, this is I'm watching a genocide, ironically, being committed by people who had suffered genocide, holocausts, um, and it's not, we can't blame it on us not having information. No, I did not know this was going on. This is a new world where if somebody farts somewhere, you eventually learn about it. So we've got a world where a lot of people are just going, just don't want to deal with that, just like the Germans did. That smells a bit like burnt meat coming from those concentration camps over there. And it's getting ash on my suit, and we're having this nice alfresco dinner. We're not going to talk about what that really is going on over there. So there's now that it's amazing how even with the information that we have so much access to, people are still doing the don't talk about that, or you know oh, mom and dad, why did our Jewish neighbors get that big loud knock on the door and there was all those screaming and yelling? What was that? Shh, don't talk about it. Well, we've got it in 2D rather than 3D. I mean, if you want to really check out, you can find exactly, there's hundreds of people being killed by those new bombs that we gave them, the Zionist state, and they're bombing them. And, we just saw Syria collapse. Everyone went, hooray, Assad is gone. But the survivors of ISIS and Al-Qaeda are now running an Islamic State of the entire Syria that the Americans are not occupying in the Northeast. This is a grounds for all kinds of destabilization. So if ever there was a time so what I'm saying is that we're going to face a military disaster, either in Taiwan or in Europe, but most likely between Iran. And the other thing too is Iran, Israel could even drop a nuke on Iran's Fornos area, and it probably wouldn't penetrate. We just dropped a gravity bomb, one of the big ones that wasn't a nuclear bomb. We can't even get into the Yemeni underground stations. So what we've basically been doing, I mean, there's a whole bunch of reporters went to Yemen, and one of them, Pepe Escobar, and some Irish, two Irish couple that were so vocal in the European Parliament, they were primaried out. They're there right now. And when we were talking about, oh, we hit this base and they were building this and that. Well, Pepe Escobar, hours after it happened, was in the base, and it's a hospital that was under construction. And he picked up the U.S. serial number and stuff like that. And so we're just killing civilians in Yemen. we're not reaching the Anstrala people at all. And one of these days, one of their hypersonic missiles is going to sink one of our ships. And the other thing too is our U.S. Navy in Operation Desert Storm, in Iraqi Freedom, even, we are still good. You know that to deal with the loss of people joining up for the Navy, I would say, because a lot of them are starting to say, I want to defend the United States against enemies, but I don't want to be a Roman centurion fighting the Gauls in some distant land for the empire, okay? And so why the enlistment is falling is because people are getting wise to it too. They're just saying, I don't want to fight for Monsanto. I want to fight for the United States of America if we're threatened. If so, the problem is that um, to cut corners and deal with the shortages of crews, a lot of our carriers are short of people and our cruisers. We did it with this brilliant idea. This is a brilliant idea, brilliantly stupid. We cut way down all our logistical freight ships, our ammunition ships, our supply ships. You know, when we built those navies to go across Normandy and another equally vast navy to go across the Pacific, if you watch movies of the Pacific War, you will see Liberty ships going 50 miles over the horizon. We needed to build one a day to keep up with the logistical needs of fighting a two-front war in World War II. And there were 10 million people laboring on that kind of stuff with 15 million in uniform. We had this brilliant idea that, oh, well, we don't need those freighters, maybe freighters with cranes that can help come up to the ship and load another vast pile of weapons. Because when we fire these things, they go out really quick and they're very expensive. And guess what? We don't have a very deep reserve of any of this. I mean, I could see a situation. You know why the Vincent is coming in as a second strike group in the region? Because the Harry S. Truman carrier group is running out of missiles, which means they're going to have to sail out and find some port where they can stock up again with missiles to come shoot them for a few weeks and leave again. We don't have staying power in Taiwan. We don't have staying power in the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman and all that. So we are setting our, if I look at a naval parallel of battle, we are the Baltic Fleet of Russian Empire in the Russo-Japanese War. The ships are old, the ships are rusting, they're not, the crews are downmanned, and they, because of the Suez Canal being blocked against the war by the British, the Russians had to steam all the way around the Horn of Africa to go all the way across the Indian Ocean, through the Indonesian Straits to finally get near Japan, between Korea and Japan at Tsushima, where the Japanese Navy under Togo absolutely destroyed the Russian Baltic Fleet. We're heading for Tsushima in the Persian Gulf, Tsushima in the Taiwan Strait. And what will happen, finally, it will be a great shock. You know, one of the reasons why the Russian Revolution happened is because of the debacle, the Russo-Japanese War, that, you know, the Russian system wasn't working. There were already in that very same year that the war ended, 1905, that is, that was the first demonstration of hundreds of thousands of Russian labor workers, their family, their children. They all dressed up in their Sunday best to go peacefully to the Winter Palace, where they expected to petition the Tsar to reform and help them get more assistance for living better. And it was completely peaceful. Everybody was in their Sunday best clothes. They were led by Russian Eastern Orthodox metropolitan priests and bishops with icons. And one group got closer to the Winter Palace. Uh, the Tsar wasn't in town that day. He actually went out to his Zarsevo area out in the forest, so far away from St. Pete. He didn't want to even deal with it. He just didn't deal with it. He said, Commander of the Lifeguards, the Imperial Guards, you deal with it. Of course, he dealt with it in a ruthless way. Basically, these men, women, and children came up, and he unleashed the Cossacks with whips and chains to start a stampede and bludgeon the people. And then the worst area was at the Narva Gate. A large multitude came to the Narva Gate, and the commander of the Imperial Russian Guard moved 2 regiments to line up in front of the gate. And the people couldn't believe it. They were preparing to shoot them, and they fired 2 volleys into the crowd, the priests too, and then they ordered a march of bayonets like a phalanx, and started bayoneting them. And then the stampede, a lot of people died. And some of the people were even seen, they couldn't believe this was happening. In fact, the Metropolitan who was running this petition, he famously said, and it was spread all over Russia, there is no God, he said in Russia, there is no Tsar. And what happened was the terror of that began the process which ended in 1917 in the Bolshevik Revolution. It began in 1905. So, and some people were actually pulling their shirts open, their coats open. It's 20th January, it's cold. And they were like, men were like, buttons popping, were showing their chest and say, I dare you to shoot. And they shot him, So literally that was a situation nationally that was a forever, we will never, a forever reality that we will not see the Tsar, if there's Tsars again, in the same way, in this innocent, naive way. We will not believe that little Nicky, our Tsar, would do such a thing. So for them, for the Russian people, it began, there is no Tsar, and it ended. In a way, the karma was that the Tsar's family was shot and the Tsar was shot, but he started it with the first volleys by not being there and being with his people. Karma. So we have not had suffered a total defeat like Germany, like Napoleon's France. We could have our first American experience of seeing our just completely losing this. And then we'll have to kind of deal with that. And maybe we'll grow up a little and get a little humble, more humble than we are right now. We're the good guys. We wear the white hats. Well, no, you're wearing the black hat now on more than one front. And you know what happens to black hats? Eventually, if they don't change, you lose big. And I hope it doesn't happen. I'm an American. I don't want to see this happen. I don't want to see any people dying. I'm saying these things because I'm also trying to fix a problem like Scott Ritter. And sometimes the things I say are controversial, like Scott Ritter, but I get him. I get what he's trying to say. And even a lot of the people in the alternative media community, it's an interesting thing to see how some people are getting it and some people are thinking he's not right at all. But anyway, that's why we discuss things.
Well, we've gotten to that hour, John.
Ah.
I want to remind the audience, in the description of all the videos I do with John, there is a link there that you can click that'll take you to his website. That'll allow you to purchase his periodicals. You can do a reading. John also has 52 books that have been published. So John, before we go, can you just explain to the audience, we have some new people that have noticed that I haven't seen in the chat before. Just explain what you offer on your website and what a reading is and how they can sign up for it.
You know, it's interesting. I never thought I would have been so involved in what's called the alternative media. But now that it's kind of starting to become a new mainstream media, it does so with something that the mainstream media, which I often appeared on all over the world, I've been everywhere. I've done and the legacy media, I've done BBC, I've done Deutsche Welle, I've done Channel One Russia, Domani Channel, and Ren TV in Russia. I've seen as a guest of many networks that we don't have the money that the networks waste on their fake news. And so if you can, there's ways to help. We literally I can literally keep doing this because there are people who help be patrons to this. Now, what I can invite you to do is, and soon there's going to be a new one out, but there's already on hogueprophecy.com, HOGUEPROPHECY.com. I always put free samples and usually a free article of each new wave of Hogue prophecy reports, and you get a taste. And if you feel, I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot. I mean, you can do an automatic payments at PayPal to be on it, and that means just $5 a month. You can also do it as one time, $60 a month, the same amount, but $60 one shot. And it's what keeps us going. And also, you can go to look for John Hogue on Amazon.com. Go to any of my book pages, which are many, and you'll look for my my little web page where you can says John Hogue. Click on it, and you can then see all of my books that Amazon sells. It's not everything I sell, but you'll see a whole lot of them. And I sell these books usually at $4.99 because my idea is I'd rather have more readers and make a living with a less of a cut so that I can have the balance of more of you reading my books and also make a living at it. So there are a lot of great books there. There's and not just Nostradamus theme books, but many other things, many other topics, other prophetic traditions that I also look at, like the Last Pope and also the Hopi prophecies. The Essential Hopi Prophecies is one of my most popular books. I think it's because I don't get lost in the brambles that have happened since it became a popular psychic event where everybody's got a Hopi prophecy that they found somewhere. I go back to the source when it all started, and the prophecies I have in this book are the Hopi prophecies, not the embellishments that have come ever since. So you get those. And I even have comedy books, like because of my P.O. box and having to explain it because it was the only number left when I moved here many decades ago. I have a book called Everything You Always Wanted to Know About 666, but were afraid to ask. I do a little homage to the other book about sex that I was using this title with. And then I talk about all the funny stories about 666, how it's used, how it's abused. It's a funny, sometimes I write funny books, like my one on the 29th, the Mayan calendar prophecies is called Nostradamus, The End of End Times. 5,000 New Age authors. Everybody was writing something about 2012, but it really got to be a question is, why isn't John Hogue writing anything about 2012? So I got a lot of questions that way. I said, you know what? I'm going to do something the other writers don't dare to do, because I said in 1987 on my first radio show, I said, you know what, this whole thing is just made up hocus pocus of the New Age. It's melding the Mayan calendar in with other things, and it probably is a case that no wonder how wonderfully they counted without high technologies, they are probably off by one back tune of 13 years. And the Mayan calendar change actually happened in 1999. And even though Nostradamus had no association directly with that, he also saw 1999 as that moment. So I wrote my book and I wrote during the time, but I published it a month after everybody's going, what the F happened? Nothing. The great went 2020, 2012, that is. And so I explain humorously how how the big thing missed, and then talk about the Mayan calendar and how it really functions. So that's there's another 61 books that will take you to interesting places like that. Like, for instance, why why did why did the Notre Dame burn down? And did Nostradamus see it, since he used to pray there? Well, he did, I contend. And who did it, and why they're not talking about it? So that's just another book. So anyway, you really can help me in many ways, and it doesn't have to cost a lot. And I really would appreciate it if you could help me keep doing this. And also, I do readings, one-on-one, just same office that you see here, same black Renaissance shirt. And it's just you and me. And they can go 2 hours sometimes. And there's tarot card reading with it. And we also do a little experiment, because I have breaks. Every 40 minutes, I take a 10-minute break. And when I get back free on Zoom, the people are amazed at whatever we're doing in this reading. Time is changing. It's the 40-minute cycles go faster and faster and faster, yet it's the same time. So I've stumbled accidentally upon not only a reading, but an experience of Einstein's theory of relativity, which I will close by saying, when Einstein was at cocktail parties at Princeton University, a lot of the professors who weren't scientists would come up to him and say, you know, I really don't understand what the theory of relativity is. So can you explain in simple terms what it is? And he said, why, sure I can. It's very simple. When you are with your wife for an hour, it's an eternity. But when you're with your mistress for an hour, it's too short. And on that, I rest my case.
Well, I do want, to thank, John, for being on the show. This is our 32nd episode of this long series that we started more than 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
But we did even shows 4 years ago, or even 5 years ago, I think.
Mhm.
But we were doing those sporadically.
Yeah.
But so we probably have more than 40 shows out there that we've recorded. But thank you very much, John. But the audience, please help support John's work by clicking the link. It's in all the videos I've done. Just click that link. That'll take you to his website. You can sign up for the periodical. You can sign up for the readings. I've done a reading. For the ones that have been watching the show regularly, the last show we did 2 weeks ago, we were talking about my father passing, and we did kind of we did this card reading that you did, and I think that show was there was a healing aspect to it. At least for me, it was.
Well, it was, and a lot of people wrote in, and they were really touched, and a lot of people
there was
that we
special.
went there, and the card reading, I had no idea I was going to do a card reading. This is how I do readings. The way Osho initiated me into this is to do nothing, just be, feel my presence, and whatever you say or do is perfectly right. And that's what I've been doing since 1987, and so I said, oh my God, I'm going to do a reading now.
No, it was, and these shows are totally unscripted, and we have, funny moments and
Yeah,
that happen too, that happened
we
today.
have everything happens. Yeah,
Too bad Mr. T left, but
yeah, and sorry,
but
Don, but
yeah, but
if you want to, I mean, if you want to have a, uh, he was kind of saying something about, well, yeah, well, you're on this show and all that. Well, make your own show, Don. You've got a lot of
well, the thing
interesting
is that
stuff. You should do your own show.
we are doing an experiment, John, and that is that we're trying to do the simulcast with Spaces,
Yeah,
but the etiquette on Spaces is different than, let's say, a talk radio show. With Spaces, it's, there's some of these spaces that you have 100 people in there,
yeah,
right? And there can be this commotion, and it's hard to manage, and
yeah.
people talk over each other, so we're trying to merge two different etiquettes, and maybe it's my fault for not managing it properly.
Well,
But the thing is that we want the audience to engage us and ask questions.
yes,
But the problem comes in is that sometimes it can get heated, and that we don't want we're not looking for arguments. We're
yeah,
looking just for dialogue. But the whole point is that to allow for time for you to provide your opinion. That's the
yeah,
whole point of the show,
yeah.
not for others to pontificate,
Yeah.
because then it would be,
And I'm not against pontificating.
right,
If you guys
but,
want to, Don, if you want to
right,
pontificate,
yeah,
make your own show,
right,
and then
right.
you can
But
run the time the way you like.
we're merging two different kind of, you and I, you're
Well,
older than
this,
I am, but we're coming from a different etiquette than
well,
some of
and
the
it's,
younger individuals,
yeah.
where they're they don't know what radio is. They don't listen to radio.
Well,
They didn't know what,
and actually, I'm learning
calling
from,
shows, like in C-SPAN or anything like
yeah,
that.
yeah. Well, and I'm learning from, actually, I watch a lot of shows that are trying to do the same. We just started doing this, but Scott Ritter and Jeff, his host, have been doing this a while, and it was interesting that Jeff had to also sometimes say, just one question. We'll answer the question, and Scott answers, Ritter answers very thoroughly, and uh,
Right.
so
See, here's the problem that I have is that I have a lot of people typing, but not a lot of people clicking for the mic. There's a shyness that I sense. There are people in Spaces during the show, but
yeah.
there's a shyness that we have to break through. And
Well, we got to give them more. Everybody's got to have a little more time,
right,
not just a few people.
get better. But audience, thank you for
Thank you.
participating. The ones on Rumble, on YouTube, and on X Spaces. Thank you for listening. I greatly appreciate it. John, tell the audience goodbye before I shut everything down, but stay online here. It's going to take me a little while to shut everything down.
Goodbye, and have a good evening, and bless you all. I love you.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Let me do this long orchestrated shutdown. Just stay on the line, John.